The Ashanti Kingdom was one of the strongest kingdoms in West Africa. It was big and had basically subdued all its neighbors. It had a few wars here and there between the neighbors, but it was basically like the big dog in town at that particular time, which is now modern day Ghana. Now the Ashantis had a lot of control because they used to trade in gold, in slaves, in cola, and all these different things. Now, during this period of time is when the British were coming to Africa. Now they really wanted control of the Gold Coast because of all the gold that was there. But they had one person or one group that really was the barrier between them and what they wanted to accomplish. That was the Ashanti. So the first conflict was in the 19th century. In 1824, the Ashanti defeated the British in a major battle. But in 1826, the British and their allies, which included, the rivals of the Ashanti, like the African rivals of the Ashantis, defeated the Ashantis in the Battle of Catamanso. These battles kept going back and forth during the 19th century. So sometimes the Ashanti won and sometimes the British won. Now the British really, really wanted control of this area. And they wanted to move inland to Kumasi, which was the capital of the Ashanti Kingdom. And it was really important to anybody who wanted to control that area completely needed to control Kumasi. They also wanted to stop the Ashanti from controlling trade routes and collecting taxes from the smaller tribes. Now, the 1874 war, the British sent a large army to fight the Ashanti. They captured and burned down Kumasi. After this period, the Ashanti lost a lot of its power and territory, and they forced them to sign a treaty. So basically, they still had not put them under British control, but they were a bit weaker, and now the British were sort of had the upper hand in this time, and they were encroaching very fast. In 1888, Prempeh I became the Asantewaa, which is the equivalent of the king. He wanted to keep the peace and avoid more wars with the British. He refused to let the Ashanti become a British protectorate, but he did not fight back with force. In 1896, the British came back again to Kumasi. This time they didn't fight. They arrested the king and other chiefs and sent them into exile in the Seychelles. They did this to take full control of the Ashanti region. Now, one of the men who was taken with the king was the grandson of a lady called Yaa Asantewaa. She was the queen mother of Ejisu. Now, during this period, there was a British official. His name was Sir Frederick Hodgson. He called a meeting in Kumasi, and he realized that there was no way to subdue these people. The Ashanti still had their pride. But what he figured was, these people cannot be subdued if the Golden Stool is still in their possession. See, the Golden Stool represented the kingdom, and it represented the king and everything sacred to the Ashanti. So even if the king was not present, as long as the Golden Stool was in the kingdom, it meant that the Ashantis had their pride and the kingdom was still standing. So this guy said that in order for them to subdue them, they had to sit on the throne to show them that now the Ashanti people belong to the British kingdom. This meeting was called in the 1900, the year 1900. A lot of chiefs were in attendance, a lot of Ashanti chiefs. They were a bit murmurs and everything. They didn't really do much during the meeting. Now, they were very fearful of the British. And they were just, within themselves, they were wondering, what should we do now? What should we do? Now, the queen mother of Ejisu, Yaa Asantewaa, rose up and gave them a speech. She could not believe what she was seeing, but that the men were cowering, that they just could not stand up for themselves and they were a bit hesitant to go to war with the British. In her speech, she said that if the men were not willing to fight, the women would pick up their guns and go to war. Because she felt this as a sort of bad for the reputation of the Ashanti. They were known as these people who would go and capture other people and kingdoms and conquer all these different kingdoms. Now, it is even believed that during this meeting, she actually took a gun and shot it in the air to show that she was ready to fight. This reinvigorated the men to want to go to war. So Yaa Asantewaa and a few other people, who were now picked as leaders, went to gather a large army. They were ready now to go to war with the British. Now the Ashanti forces organized themselves to go and surround the fort in Kumasi where the British had camped. During this war, they used traditional warfare tactics, including building strong stockades and barricades along the roads in the forest, so they would have different battles along the way. And some of them would overcome the British, some of them they'll have to run away and come back and, put the stockades up again. But this time, what bothered the British was this was the first time that the Ashanti used the stockades, and they were wondering where they got this idea from. People still speculate on where they really got this idea from. Some say they got it from a different countries. Some say they learned it in a different war. But this was really difficult for the British to overcome, and they were having a very huge problem dealing with the Ashanti during this period. Because they would actually attack, hide in the forest, cutting off supplies. Now it came time to go to the fort. They laid siege to the British fort in Kumasi. Inside the fort were 600 British troops, officials, and civilians. They also had some African soldiers with them, which were like the Fante and Hausa, who were part of like the British army, from somewhere from Nigeria and the like. They cut off supplies there for weeks, and the British were trapped inside the fort. Many actually fell sick and died from starvation and the like, and all these diseases because the Ashanti were just around. So what the British did, they sent word. So they actually did use a pretty clever trick because they knew the Ashanti would understand if they sent for reinforcement. They wrote it in French to the ones who understood French, so for them to get backup. So now the British reinforcements arrived. They sent troops from the coast to go and help these people who were trapped in this fort and push back on the Ashanti. Now when they came, they came with a lot of weapons, new weaponry, superior weaponry that the Ashanti just could not deal with. They fought through the forest and burning villages and cutting through all these paths to reach to Kumasi. After a few battles here and there, they got inside the fort and rescued the people inside. Even after this battle at the fort, Yaa Asantewaa and her fighters did not give up. They moved into the forest and continued to resist. They had knowledge of the terrain, so they could actually come up with different ways to fight the British. But eventually, the Ashanti forces also ran out of food and they kept on retreating, and the British kept on encroaching on the land and taking over town after town after town. Even after all these other towns were taken, Yaa Asantewaa would not give up. She kept on moving and escaping and going to a different area, gathering troops and trying to resist again. More chiefs just kept on getting captured by the British. Some surrendered. During this period, Yaa Asantewaa and a few of her men thought of reaching out to the French. They knew that the British and the French were in competition with each other, so they sort of knew that maybe the French would help them out. This word got to the British that they were sending word to the French, and they knew that unless they got rid of this resistance, they would be a thorn to their side all the time. They could not just let them hide in the forest. So they basically surrounded the forest that she was hiding in. And now she basically had no other thing to do than to go to Kumasi, where she surrendered and was captured by the British. Now Yaa Asantewaa and most of the chiefs and people who were in charge of leading this battle were exiled to Seychelles. Some of them were executed based on, the nature of the offense that they had done during the war. She stayed in Seychelles in exile up until the year 1921 when she died. Now the King Prempeh, was returned back after a couple of years and was taken back to the mainland in Ghana. This war marked the very last conflict between the British and the Ashanti, and it's termed as the most bloody conflict between the two groups, where thousands of people died on both sides. In the year 1930, her remains were taken back to her village, where she was buried as a heroine of the war. This was the first time in known history that a woman had led people to war against the British, at least in that part of the world. In her memory, I'll read the full speech that she gave the men for them to go to war when they had all given up. So this is her speech, and it goes like this. Now I have seen that some of you fear to go forward to fight for our king. If it were the brave days of Osei Tutu, Okomfo Anokie, and Opuku Ware, 8 chiefs would not sit down to see their king taken without firing a shot. No white man could have dared to speak to the chief of Asante in the way the governor spoke to you chiefs this morning. Is it true that the bravery of the Asante is no more? I cannot believe it. It cannot be. I must say this. If you, the men of Asante, will not go forward, then we will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white man. We will fight till the last of us falls on the battlefield. That was the speech that she gave the men, and they decided to pick up their weapons. What happened to the Golden Stool? Well, the British were never able to confiscate it. The Ashanti hid it well, and it was discovered way years later, buried, where it was taken to the royal palace in Kumasi, and it is still there today. Because the Ashanti still believe this was the soul of the Ashanti and could never be desecrated by the British. That is the story of the Yaa Asantewaa War.